So I've been playing Starfield for the last few days now via early access. And before we kind of jump in and give you kind of my initial thoughts and impressions of the game, this is certainly not a review of Starfield because I'm only about 15 hours or so into the game. Starfield has a very rich and compelling story, and I don't want to give any spoilers away for the game, but I will say that you begin the game as a miner and you kind of uncover this kind of interesting and unique artifact, and then you kind of go through this adventure of trying to discover what these artifacts are and try to recover them as well. So I don't want to kind of go too deeper than that at this point, but the story really kind of grabs you pretty much from the get-go, and I think that's one of the great things that Bethesda Game Studios has always been really good at, is a compelling story that really just kind of grabs you initially and takes you to all sorts of places with, you know, the various kind of choices that you can select during the game itself. Now, I don't want to focus too much on the story because I know people are currently playing the game, and look, to be honest, there are people that are playing the game and they've been playing, you know, 100+ hours worth of Starfield. So for me, I just kind of want to leave it at that. It does start out very compelling, and you know, as I've been playing through the game, I'm very, very interested to see where it takes me. So full marks to Bethesda Game Studios for the storyline, at least, of the game. Now, the creation engine has been used in many previous Bethesda Game Studios games, and for all intents and purposes, it gets the job done, but it also has that Bethesda kind of jank associated with it. But I will say that this iteration of the creation engine is the best that we've ever seen. As far as the graphics, for the most part, they are significantly enhanced over the previous Bethesda Game Studios games, and for the most part, they look absolutely phenomenal. Now, there is obviously going to be parts of the game where the textures look a lot lower res than what we would expect. But for the most part, if you basically stop and take a look at the model design and the kind of materials that are used and the kind of the number of triangles or the geometry in a particular scene, it's extremely detailed. And it's something that we haven't really seen before in a creation engine game. So this is a very welcome thing. And it's something that we do come to expect, obviously, in 2023 with the Xbox Series and modern PCs. We expect good visuals, and Starfield, the Creation Engine 2.0, absolutely delivers it. If you take a look at your spaceship that you start with here, you can see it's extremely detailed, not only from the outside, but even inside the cockpit. You can see that all the controls on the pilot control panel look absolutely phenomenal. One of the things that I really love about Starfield is the ship combat as well. It's something that gave me shades of playing games like Elite and Frontier and First Encounters, those old kind of David Braben games from the 80s and 90s, where you would be kind of in an aerial dogfight with, you know, spaceships and trying to basically destroy them and then take their cargo. Well, in Starfield, there's a very similar vibe when it comes to ship-to-ship combat. It's actually quite good. Now, a lot of people I've spoken to don't care about the ship combat, but for me, I think it feels great. It's dialed in exceptionally well, and overall, I'm a huge fan of the ship combat in the game. The space travel aspect of the game is a little lacking, and that has to do with loading screens, and I'll come back to that here shortly, but I do want to kind of check off a couple of other things on my list here. Look, when we talk about the creation engine, when we talk about Bethesda Game Studios, there's always going to be that jank associated with it. And some of the character models in the game aren't anywhere near as detailed as others. And I'm talking about kind of just regular NPCs that are walking around the city. But if you really gonna just stop and move around a particular city, like Atlantis, for example, you can see that there is a lot of NPC activity. It really kind of gives that impression of a living city. And I think this is something that Bethesda Game Studios has struggled with when we talk about, you know, games like Skyrim or Oblivion. These kind of cities, even though they are populated, they seem very, very, very stale. You know, that there's not really anything going on too much, right? But with a game like Starfield, they've put a lot of emphasis on, you know, increasing the population counts and making it feel like a breathing, livable city. And I think that's a really cool thing. Now, another great thing about the creation engine, which I guess is good in one aspect, but potentially has issues in other areas, and we'll get to, is that everything is persistent in this game. And what I mean by that is, if you have a particular object and I fly to the moon and I drop that object will be on the moon as long as no one picks it up or something happens, which probably would never happen in this game. But that object, I could go back to the moon 200 hours later into playing Starfield, and I could still retrieve that item off the ground. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it just makes the world seem more realistic, where, you know, things just don't disappear or despawn. Your objects will always be there. You know, things will always be there. If you remember where they were, or if you have an idea of where they were, you can just go back and retrieve something. And that really is a credit to the creation engine itself. Now, object persistence also has its downside, and it has to do with performance. Obviously, there is CPU processing that is involved with keeping track of all your objects, all the objects in the game. And I think that is kind of the reason why we're not seeing 60 FPS running on Xbox Series X. And I'll come back to performance a little bit later, but I wanted to move on and talk about bugs as well. Now, there are bugs in this game. I've seen some interesting character model animations. There was one which I didn't unfortunately clip, where one of the NPCs that was on my spaceship, when we flew off with the kind of animation sequence, you could actually see their legs sticking out from under the ship itself. So there are those kind of typical Bethesda bugs. But I will say that at least as of, 15 hours or so into it, and at least from what I've read from other people's experiences, there have been no major crashes, no major glitches, no issues, no corrupted save files, none of that Bethesda jank that we've come to expect with a game that gets released. So Bethesda has obviously spent a lot of time polishing up this game. This is a massive, massive game. And I couldn't tell you the number of hours of QA time that was taken to basically test and retest and basically just spend so much time and effort making sure that this game is as bug-free as possible. And I think Bethesda and Xbox had to do this. They couldn't get away with, releasing something when like Oblivion or Skyrim came out, where it was very, very buggy initially, because we're talking about Game Pass here. We're talking about a service that when you deliver your game to, it has to be in a good quality state with little bugs as possible, and certainly no crashes, because once you start running into issues like that, then you start to lose people. And obviously people, can vote with their wallets. And, if Starfield doesn't impress quickly, especially those people that have a Game Pass subscription and want to check it out, they're not sure about Starfield, then you're going to lose those people. So great job, Bethesda and Xbox, for providing a relatively bug-free and very polished product. Now, the next thing that I did want to talk about is the character creation in Starfield, because it's something that, Bethesda Game Studios have always had, I guess, a legacy about, character creations ever since the earliest days of Fallout, for example. And the character creation in Starfield is actually very, very good. Now, Fallout 4, if you recall, it was basically you were looking in the mirror, and then you would kind of click on parts of your face, and then you could kind of make those changes. With this one, it's more of a traditional character creation screen where you've got all sorts of sliders that change your facial expressions and features. It's very, very good. It's not, Cyberpunk 2077 levels of character creation or Baldur's Gate, for example, but what we have here is good. Another kind of step up from what we saw with Fallout 4. Now, let's talk about the loading screens. I think the loading screens is going to be something that I don't want to say it's polarizing, but it's definitely a feature that may turn some people off. Now, one of the things about Starfield that you'll find out very quickly is that even though that this is an open world game or an open exploration or open universe game, I'm not really sure what we call this style of game, but everything is kind of connected via loading screens. So there's really no seamless travel from a planet to your spaceship to outer space to another planet. Everything is kind of separated by specific loading screens. And these loading screens have, I guess, the job of these loading screens is to basically just unload the current zone that you're in and then bringing the new zone that you're currently in, including like if you're in a spaceship, it's basically just loading up the zone for your spaceship. And I think one of the things about the loading screens that you'll find in Starfield is that it does get a little tedious. And I think for me personally, it does take me out of that experience in some ways. The loading screens themselves are pretty fast, and I don't really feel like, I need to kind of critique the screens themselves. I definitely get the reasoning behind it, but obviously, we're talking about a game where everything is separated by these loading screens. And I will say, if you don't like constant loading screens, then this may not be the game for you. It may actually take you out of the experience. But for me, again, I'm kind of used to playing these Bethesda Game Studios games, so I didn't really expect it to be any different. I think some people may have expected Starfield to be more along the lines of, say, No Man's Sky, where you can basically just travel from, a planet to your spaceship. You can fly off the planet. You can fly to new planets without any type of loading. But I will also add that Bethesda was very, very clear about what the expectations were with this. But it is a little jarring when you first experience the constant loading screens that you're going to experience. And for me, it does lose some marks, especially when we talk about the outer space section, because I can't just look at a planet and say, I'm going to fly there. What I have to do is select my star map and then select the planet and say, fast travel to this location. And that will, provide a loading screen, and then there'll be like a cutscene animation of my ship descending onto this particular planet. It still looks great. There's still really nothing wrong with it, but it just kind of breaks up that seamless kind of open worldness of this game. But minor nitpick, especially if you're someone that is very experienced or familiar with, Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Skyrim, Oblivion, these types of games, it's going to be very, very similar. It also happens when you're, in a particular city and you're, walking into buildings. There may be a slight cutscene, or there may be a slight loading screen, I should say, as you kind of move into a new section or a new zone of that particular part of the city as well. So I just want to kind of, make mention of that, because it is something that may, bother you in some regards. For me, look, it is disappointing that it's not seamless, but overall, I was kind of expecting to see that. Now, I do want to talk about PC performance on Starfield, because I feel like us NVIDIA owners have gotten the short end of the stick. Now, if you've been keeping up to date with Starfield and the marketing around it, it seems like everything has been geared towards AMD processors. For example, there is no DLSS implementation in Starfield. In the menus, you do get FSR2, but in my experience, performance on Starfield with my Intel i9 processor and my NVIDIA 4080, which, look, it's not a top of the range gaming PC, but it's definitely something I would say is above average, and it's put it into the maximum specs of Starfield to get a really good experience. It still struggles to hold 60 frames per second at ultra settings. And this was a little surprising to me. Now, if you're playing the game inside a smaller corridor type area, or if you're in, some kind of narrow rooms, then you get very good performance, as you would expect. But if you kind of take the game into a city area, an outdoor area like Atlantis, for example, and you kind of move around, then you quickly realize that performance on a high-end gaming PC is nowhere near where it needs to be. And this really, it did disappoint me quite a bit, because it seems like AMD is getting all the, it's getting all the good stuff. And people that have NVIDIA graphics cards, and there are a lot of us out there, aren't getting a great experience. Now, hopefully, we will get some patches and some updates to run this game better on PC. But I will say that, looking at my specs here and looking at the frame rate captures that I've got here, you can see that performance should be a lot better than what it is. It's not terrible, but I will say that, I have to kind of drop some sliders to get a locked 60 FPS experience running at 4K. And I also might add that the resolution scale is also set to 75% as well. So we're not getting kind of true 4K visuals here, even though we are running the game at 4K. We're running at 75% of 4K. So overall, I'm a little disappointed at the PC performance on Intel and NVIDIA. Now, if you're running the game on AMD, please let me know your experiences. It seems like the game is much more optimized and geared towards AMD processors and GPUs, because obviously it seems like there is a partnership, or there is marketing between AMD and Starfield, because as mentioned, there is no DLSS implementation at all, and that would be definitely something that I would like to see in Starfield. Are we going to get it? I really couldn't say, but I would like to see some better performance when it comes to the PC running Starfield. Now, on the Xbox Series X, it runs at 30 frames per second, and for the most part, it holds it, and it looks really, really good. Now, knowing what we know now about the performance on PC and the creation engine, where there's object persistence across the entire galaxy, for example, you can see why this game was never going to run at 60 frames per second. But I do think that there is more room for optimization here. There is more room to get better frame rates, to optimize and enhance the game. So could we potentially see Starfield running on the Xbox Series X with an uncapped frame rate, or at 60? Hopefully we'll get to see a patch that applies that going forward. But that may also never come. But I do want to say that PC performance, while it's okay, could be a lot better. But let me know your thoughts if you're running the game on PC. But I guess I'm going to leave it here for this kind of thoughts and impressions about Starfield. Overall, look, the game is fantastic. I'm very, very happy. It's an above average game. I think the 87 Metacritic that it kind of finally landed on sounds about right to me. I did think maybe it would score a little bit higher, but I will say that I thought that before I started playing the game. Now that I've had a taste of the game, and I think the game is very, very good, I think the 87, at least as of the making of this episode right now, like I said, 10 hours in, sounds about right to me. So I think Xbox fans can be very happy with Starfield, and I think most of them are. I think overall it's a fantastic game. It'll probably be in the Game of the Year conversation this year for the Game Awards, and I think it deserves its place as well. But that are just my quick initial thoughts and impressions of Starfield. Are you playing Starfield right now? Let me know in the description below, in the comments below, your thoughts and opinions, especially if you're playing on PC. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it, because I think for everything that I've experienced with Starfield, even the loading screen stuff, the PC performance was kind of the most disappointing aspect of the game. But thank you so much for watching, guys. If you like this episode, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye for now.